As tensions reach a boiling point in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, the European Union has reached a critical decision regarding Ukraine's dire situation. To counter Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russia, member states have reached a breakthrough deal after extensive negotiations to address the escalating crisis. The agreement among the 27 EU ambassadors that looks like a financial attack on Vladimir Putin revolves around utilizing profits generated from frozen Russian central bank assets within the bloc to provide Ukraine with significant additional funding for arms and ammunition. This landmark decision, announced by Belgium, which holds a significant portion of these assets, marks a significant step forward after weeks of arduous negotiations. The timing of the EU's recent move is likely to anger Russia. This comes just days after Russian President Vladimir Putin struck a conciliatory tone with the West, expressing his willingness to engage in dialogue, but not when it comes from a position of power.
We do not refuse dialogue with Western states. The choice is theirs. Do they intend to continue trying to restrain the development of Russia, continue the policy of aggression, continuous pressure on our country for years, or look for a path to cooperation and peace? I repeat, a conversation, including on issues of security and strategic stability, is possible, but not from a position of strength, without any arrogance, conceit, and personal exclusivity, but only on equal terms, respecting each other's interests.
Belgium, who has long advocated for utilizing the interest accrued from these funds for Ukraine's reconstruction efforts, has now expanded its scope to cover military expenditures as well. This deal is anticipated to allocate up to €3 billion or $3.2 billion annually for Kyiv, with the majority earmarked for military equipment and ammunition. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo has pledged to direct approximately €1.5 billion or $1.61 billion to Ukraine. This commitment is not a new policy, but rather the result of applying existing corporate tax law to unexpected windfall gains. These gains were made by the country's largest financial service provider, Euroclear, which benefited from having frozen Russian central bank assets on its books. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen previously suggested Ukraine could receive the first funds under the mechanism by July. But the calculation will be backdated to February, when Euroclear formally segregated the assets. The Ukrainian officials, however, have stressed the necessity for the EU to go beyond interest payments, advocating for the full confiscation of Moscow's assets to hold the aggressor accountable for the costs of war. Despite unanimous support, a small faction of member states, led by Hungary, opposed supplying weapons to Ukraine, necessitating special provisions within the agreement to allocate a portion of the funds for general aid purposes. Hungary's leadership has publicly maintained its stand critical of military aid to Ukraine.
We support Ukraine to survive somehow, which is questioned because Ukraine is not more sovereign state. Ukraine is now just protectorate of the West. So without getting the money and the weapons from the European Union and United States, Ukraine as a state would cease to exist. So it's not a sovereign state anymore.
The final deal will allow Euroclear to keep a provisional buffer worth 10% of the profits in case of litigation over the funds. It can also keep 0.3% as an incentive, while 90% of the funds will be sent via the European Peace Facility to help Ukraine buy weapons.
Therefore, one should not underestimate the colossal...
This initiative, endorsed by the group of 7 leading industrialized nations, coincides with Ukraine's efforts to reverse the tide in its ongoing military campaign. With substantial financial backing from the recently approved U.S. Congress funding, Ukraine aims to fortify its defenses against the looming threat posed by Russian forces. Meanwhile, Ukraine's parliament has passed a bill offering convicts the opportunity to enlist in the army in exchange for potential parole, as part of a broader strategy to augment its military manpower. More than 26 months since Russia launched the offensive, Ukraine grapples with a shortage in manpower, identified as Kyiv's primary challenge against a much larger foe. While this measure is expected to yield only several thousand new soldiers from a potential pool of up to 20,000 convicts, it represents an innovative approach to bolstering Kyiv's forces against a formidable adversary.
The speed of delivery and implementation of decisions is something that should not be a problem either. We are waiting for the weapons to arrive in Ukraine for our warriors.
As Russian troops continue their advance in the east, Ukraine braces for an imminent offensive, prompting urgent calls for Western support to shore up its defenses.